Welcome to Ask DW on YouTube. I'm Phil Gale. This is the news show where your questions take centre stage. We'd like to hear from you on this developing conflict between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. And, of course, the breaking news that Iran has launched missiles at Israel. With us to take your questions are journalist Karim El-Gawhary, who's in Beirut. Here with me in the studio is DW's Middle East analyst, Shani Rozanes, who's across the latest from Israel. Also with us is Hans-Jakob Schindler. He's senior director at the Counter-Extremism project in Berlin. That's an NGO working to fight the growing threat posed by extremist ideologies. He has wide experience in diplomacy, intelligence and security affairs, so welcome all. If you're watching us live on YouTube, you can post your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll get to as many of them as we can in the next 45 minutes. Karim in Beirut will be leaving us in half an hour, so if you have any questions for him, get those in as soon as possible. The address, as ever, is youtube.com/DW News. All right. So let's take a look then at the latest news. Israel's military said there were hits from missiles after Iran launched nearly 200 rockets, but that a large number of the missiles were intercepted. Israel's military spokesman said he was not aware of any casualties from the missile volley. Iran said it fired dozens of missiles, and they were in retaliation, they say, to multiple assassinations carried out by Israel, including that of Hezbollah's Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut and Hamas's Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. Both leaders of those groups are widely classified as terrorist organisations. It's the latest escalation as Israel says it's carrying out raids against the Iraq-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israel has warned Iran its attacks will have consequences. OK, so that's the background to tonight's 45 minutes. Let's now go straight to Jerusalem and get the latest from our correspondent there, Tanya Kramer. Welcome, Tanya. Tell us about tonight and how you experienced this missile attack.
Well, I mean, it came with a sort of warning in a way that Israel had announced that it would change the home front guidelines. These are usually the guidelines that tell people, what to do in a case of emergency. And it was said that, people should be, there should be no gatherings. And this was also concerning the areas Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and the center, which is a bit unusual. So people thought, there might be something. And then more reports came that there might be actually some Iranian retaliation or missile attack coming up. So shortly here, local time, 7:30, the first sirens went off, and people were called before by the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a video message that he told citizens to stay nearby shelters, to follow these guidelines very strictly, and then also by the army. And then already it all happened. And I think it was like in 2 major barrages, and people here in this building where I am, people all went down to, there is actually a shelter, not everybody has a shelter, and they went down and were just, waiting. And people I talked to say they haven't really experienced such a massive strike. At this point, it took a while, and just about by 8:30 or so local time here, the military has said that people can now come out of their protected spaces. So I think, people were reminded, of course, we had in April an attack with drones and missiles from Iran directly to Iran. But this one seemed to have been, or appeared to have been a bit, stronger. But still, there's still an assessment. Most of the missiles, the army said, were a large number, they said, were intercepted. But of course, more and more information is still coming in about it.
And what is being said there about a possible or likely Israeli response?
Well, this is now, of course, the question, because we also heard from the army, and I'm sure we will hear more in the course of the evening here, also from the political level, saying that this attack will have consequences. And we should not forget, we have, a major war in Gaza. We have, the attacks in Lebanon in the past weeks, and now these incursions also into southern Lebanon. And the situation is already, escalated, although I think people here don't like to use that word anymore, because every time, you speak about escalation, it just keeps on going. But basically what everybody's expecting now is that Israel has to retaliate to this. Last time when this happened in April, it was more of a modest response. So now the question is, how will Israel retaliate? They said they will act in the time and the place that they chose, and it might be a different response than last time.
OK, thanks for that. More from you, if anything changes. Thank you so much. Let's go now then to our guest and indeed your questions. If you are watching us live on YouTube, you can post any questions you have to experts here in the studio. The address, as ever, youtube.com/DW News. First question in is from our user NPC, who asks, will this attack mean all-out war between Israel and Iran? What effects will this have on the stability in the surrounding region? Let's start off with you with that, Shani.
I mean, how is it supposed to look like? We've already seen exchanges of missiles shot between Israel and Iran. Well, definitely now coming from Iran, I'm sure we will also see Israel retaliate. We also have the Americans kind of involved in this already. So, I think when we talk about an all-out war, we need to understand what exactly might that look like. And this is still hard to imagine, that there's, a way to escalate even further. I think what we've been seeing here, Israelis were expecting at the beginning of the night that Iran will try to stick to hitting military bases and military targets, sort of to be able to push against Israel, but not to go all in. And the way we see now the attack, there were no, Iran was just shooting indiscriminately wherever. And this is why Israel feels like, all lines have been crossed, and they feel free to cross any line needed. Of course, it's always this who started, because if you ask Iranians, the attack on their own sovereignty, it was what started it all, with Israel assassinating Hania in their capital, Tehran. No doubt, today we are seeing the region far less stable. This is not a good development. But then at the same time, I think it's a bit too hard to predict how far it will go. Now the ball is in Israel's court, and we need to see how far it's going to take it when they talk about severe repercussions that Iran will have to suffer because of this attack.
Hans-Jakob Schindler, how do you see Israel responding?
Well, last time around when Israel responded in April, when it responded to the latest attack, which was more a combination of drones and missiles, this time seems to primarily be missiles, it was simply talked down, according to the US administration, to sending a signal. A very precise strike against one singular nuclear facility's air defense systems, to show Iran that while they were not able to hit anything of significance, they are very able to strike very precisely. Now, unfortunately, the correct quote is the IDF says it will have serious consequences, which I do feel means more than one precision strike like last time. And there is a lot of targets to choose from. There's nuclear installations that can be attacked. There's oil facilities. Ronald Reagan, in response to an attack by Iran, destroyed some of the oil facilities in Iran. So this can escalate very quickly now, especially since Prime Minister Netanyahu put out this video last night where he basically said the freedom for the Iranian people is closer than many things. So I feel there's a mechanism in place here, which will mean we will see some more serious airstrikes on Iran, to which Iran then will have to respond again with Israel. And I'm a little bit lost to figure out how you could stop that escalation spiral right now. The one administration who could do that is now in a real lame duck phase, the US administration. We are very close to the US elections. They are not going to take levers that are more serious than just warning Israel to de-escalate this. So I think we're looking forward to some very interesting weeks in this region.
OK, so neither of you
just one
sees
point that I wanna-
this slowing down at all from here.
And we will need to see what kind of targets Israel chooses. If they go directly to the Iran nuclear program, for example, if they go into infrastructure connected to energy, things that are very consequential for the stability of the regime. And then we will understand if Israel is aiming here to eradicate the Iranian regime, or is it really just trying to keep some sort of an equation here of deterrence?
OK. Let's take another question from a user, this time concerning the timing of Israel's attacks on targets in Lebanon. So this is the question. Why did it take so long to finally happen? It was clear for almost a year that Lebanon had to be invaded to stop Hezbollah. This is the user saying that. This is from the user at Taxi Barn, who's Taxi Barn YouTube. Well, let's put that to Karim El-Gawhary in Lebanon. What do you think? Why did it take so long before Israel actually launched this incursion?
I think basically because it's completely unclear what should come out of this incursion. This incursion until now is very limited, very small. Hezbollah is even claiming that there is no incursion at all. But when I come back to what happened tonight in Israel with the Iranian attack, of course, we have here in Lebanon supporters of Hezbollah's basically being satisfied that this is finally an answer to the killing of their leader Hassan Nasrallah, and also to the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. That's something they were waiting for a long time. What is important is also that the Iranians' inner statement, the Revolutionary Guard's inner statement, basically said, if Israel answers, there will be another answer, and this answer will be even bigger and will involve the so-called axis of resistance. Axis of resistance meaning, of course, also Hezbollah in Lebanon, meaning the Houthi rebels in Yemen and so on. So I think that is the big danger, that this is going to escalate really much more than just only Iran and Israel, that this will become a whole front of axis of resistance that are acting together in case Israel is answering. So people in Lebanon here are worried about exactly this development. Now, what's the way out of this escalation? I think it's pretty clear. The way out of this escalation goes through Gaza. Everything escalated after the 7th of October and after the Israeli offensive into the Gaza Strip. All the action Hezbollah did in the last year was basically linked to the war in the Gaza Strip. Hezbollah always said, we do this in order to put up pressure on Netanyahu in order to stop the war in the Gaza Strip. So this link, if we don't go back to this link and finally go back to the negotiations about the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, the exchange of Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners, if we don't go back to this thing, we basically are in for a big escalation. That would be really the way out. That is something, of course, nobody is talking about it, nobody is thinking about it. The problem is that if we go into the escalation, what is the end game? I mean, what can Israel now reach by attacking Iran, by starting an Israeli offensive in Lebanon? What is the end game also for Iran after an attack like this? I think strategically it's very, very unclear where all this is going to end for all the different players. They are basically thinking like now in tactical terms, what's going to happen next and what's going to happen tomorrow. But there's very little thinking about strategically long ahead, what can be reached through all of this. And again, the key, the exit out of this would be really to end the war in the Gaza Strip.
OK, thanks for that, Karim. Karim, as all our guests, is here this evening to answer your questions on youtube.com/DW. Shani Rozanes, pick up that point, would you, that Karim just made. The end game. Speculate for us on if Iran has now entered this field formally and in full view. Where does it end? Israel responds to Iran, not just to its proxies. this does look like the whole thing going up in flames.
It might. And I think, if we try to understand the Israeli mindset right now, what we've been seeing them doing, they were pushing very strong in Lebanon in the last couple of weeks. What they're trying to do is to re-establish the rules of the game in the Middle East and say, basically, we are not playing according to the rules that we've had so far. Israel had a tremendous shock after the October 7th attack. It took it a long time to move from the position of defense into taking the initiative. And this is what we've been seeing in the last months. Actually, if you ask me, I would pin the point on the time that Netanyahu had his speech in the Congress in July when he said, give me more artillery and I can win faster and stronger. So already then he is setting the goal to be more aggressive. And what Israel tries to do, if you want to understand what will it gain from attacking Iran now and this back and forth, Israel wants to first reestablish its force in the region. They feel they have lost this. Their belief in their mightiness and their capabilities was completely shattered after October 7th. They want to re-establish that, even if it means washing the streets of Arab cities with local blood. If that's what it takes, Israelis will not stop. So that's one thing, because if they feel like it's an important tool in their tool set of deterrence, that's one thing. And then, again, they actually feel that all of these threats, most of them orchestrated by Iran and their proxies. Iran is a paper tiger. This is what Israel wants to see it, and that's what it wants to looking to expose right now. Iran is very good in talking and keeping up appearance as we are tough, we are strong. But eventually, you cannot, the way Israelis see it, you cannot really threaten us. Even if you look at this barrage, very much like the previous one in April, we're talking about a percentage of interception that is unbelievable. We're talking about this time 0 hits, not a single person that reported in Israel to have been hit by this. So Iran gives it its most, and Israel says, if that's what you got, we're not afraid of you, and sort of trying to reverse, the rules of conduct that we have been seeing ruling the whole region in the last couple of decades.
And Jacob Schindler, is that the way you see it? Is this as much as Iran has?
Well, I mean, first of all, the premise that it was inevitable that Israel had to invade Lebanon is, in my opinion, not correct. There were multiple off-ramps that the US and the French had been put to Hezbollah. The demands weren't outrageous. They were supposed to withdraw 30 miles from the border to Israel. There was no de-arming of Hezbollah that was part of the offered deal. And Hezbollah, again and again, continued to threaten and shoot at northern Israel. And after 11 months of this, and they only got into the game to help Hamas. And they weren't the ones attacking Israel on the 7th of October, and they weren't the ones that Israel was attacking after the 7th of October. So this is really a situation where for 11 months the Israeli government waited and waited and waited, and then there was no other option. So it was not really inevitable that this was supposed to be happening. As for Iran, this is what Iran can provide. If they haven't been managing on the second time to hit everything, this is what they got. They were, in 2019, able, with a surprise attack, to hit very precisely an oil installation in Saudi Arabia and thereby establish the narrative in the region that their rocket and drone arsenal is extremely effective. In April, very clearly, this was meant to simply send a signal. We want to respond, but we don't want to really hit anything. You do not announce rocket attacks while they are launched on national television, giving them, in the case of drones, hours for the Israelis and the regional partners as well as the US to prepare for the attack. This was a missile attack which took less than an hour to reach Israel. There was the minimum response time. This is as good, in inverted comma, as it gets for the Iranian arsenal. That does not to say that other countries in the region would have similar good air defenses, but for Israel, this is not the problem. The problem that Israel has is you cannot accept your country to be attacked for whatever reason without actually making clear that the attacker will have to pay a price. And if the signal in April that they can hit without Iranian air defenses being able to detect that hasn't actually gotten the message through to Tehran that this is an extremely dangerous game and they're trying again, then you will have to do this, unfortunately, all over again. And I'm worried of the extent of the Israeli response at this point.
OK. Let's bring in Karim El-Gawhary in Beirut. And Karim, until this attack happened in the last hour or so, all the talk had been about Israel's supposed incursion into Lebanon and whether and how Hezbollah would respond. How can they... Two questions in one, really. First of all, Hezbollah disputes that Israel has actually made this incursion. And two, does Hezbollah still have the wherewithal to launch any sort of fight back?
Well, the simple answer is we don't know. We don't know what is the military potential Hezbollah still possesses. We know that a lot of the military leadership were killed, but they, of course, can be substituted. We know it was a big blow that the head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, was killed. But that means by far not the end of this organization. We don't know the military potential. We also don't know really what's the long-term planning, because if Netanyahu's goal of this operation in Lebanon and now of this military incursion, if it happened or didn't happen or will maybe happen in a bigger way in the next days, if this military incursion, he said the goal is to return the 60,000 Israeli civilians that had to be evacuated from North Israel. Now, to spoil this, Hezbollah doesn't have to have a huge missile strike onto Israel. Hezbollah has to just show that they still exist, that they still have the potential to shoot a few missiles here and there onto Israel. And by just simply doing that, they will spoil this idea. Actually, in fact, let's say we talk about the UN resolution 1701. We talk about the possibility of Hezbollah withdrawing behind the Litani River. 1701, by the way, also includes no Israeli incursions by air and or water into Lebanon. That's the second part. But let's say this would happen, that Hezbollah would withdraw behind it. They still would have the military potential probably and the missiles to be able to hit Israel. Israel has one big problem. It has absolutely no strategic depth. And that is something, of course, that they cannot strategically overcome. That is easy for Hezbollah to spoil at any time. So at the end, I think, again, the solution to all this is, I think we can't forget the idea that Hezbollah will be destroyed as much as we can forget the idea that Hamas will be destroyed. We have two different narrations in this region. We have now the Israeli narration that says, like, well, the one who is responsible for all of this is Iran. We have the Arab narration who's saying, like, the thing that is the base of everything that is responsible for all of this is the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land. So how do we get out of this? Really, again, the way is first to really end the Gaza Strip and then to find a political solution, because without giving Palestinians their rights, there will be no security for Israel. And I think that is really the only strategic way out of this disaster.
OK, thank you so much for that, Karim El-Gawhary in Beirut. I think you have to leave us now, so thank you so much for your contributions and your insights. Let's take another of your questions. Got questions coming in about the diplomatic role that Europe can play in the Middle East. User Max Payne asking, do you think Germany and Europe should take a more neutral stance and put pressure on Israel and the USA for a ceasefire? Do we, as Germany or even the EU, have the capacity and capability to do that? Perhaps you'd like to take that, Hans Jakob.
Yeah, first I just want to clarify something. There is no political, strategic or tactical advantage for Israel to announce an incursion in Lebanon without actually having an incursion in Lebanon. So I think it's beyond doubt there is an advantage for Hezbollah to say there is no incursion, because if there is no incursion, you don't have to respond, right? It's, in my opinion, a expression of the weakened military terrorist structure of Hezbollah. Not the political and the economic structure, but the military structure is really, at the moment, as far as command and control is concerned, really in disarray. So number 2 and number 3 levels of commanders of the Jihad Council are simply no longer with us. So their ability to respond in a coordinated manner is very much reduced. So it is a tactical advantage for them to just basically deny that there's any military operation. On the European role, the times where the Europeans were a major player in this conflict, unfortunately, are long past. Europeans had joined as a European Union, and then individually several European states, including Germany, on the call for a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah that the Americans had put out during the UN General Assembly meeting in New York. However, the one country that has actual influence with Israel is the United States. So in concert with the US administration, who, by the way, also have said if Iran attacks Israel, it will have serious consequences. There's something that can be done individually as countries or as the EU. We are simply not an important enough diplomatic player in the region at this point to go outside of where the US administration is going.
And I want to add to that, if I may. It's a pity because when you talk about Lebanon, for example, then we have, of course, the French. They have great leverage and influence still in Lebanon. They were trying to be part of this deal for a ceasefire we heard about last week that collapsed even before it managed to actually be seriously discussed. So it's a pity because I think, first of all, the Americans now are very much busy with November 5th, with the election. That's the main priority they have. The Americans are very much concerned of the possibility of being dragged to an all-out war here. They want to help Israel with defense, but not much more than that. And they see themselves slowly dragged deeper and deeper, and they would really like to see de-escalation as soon as possible. But we also need to keep in mind both Hezbollah and Hamas, these are terror organizations acknowledged by the US, but not only, many European countries as well. And this is something Israel is banking on, in the sense that even if there's great divide about Israel means to the goal, the bottom line is that they all agree on the same goal. If you look at the Europeans, if you look at the Americans and Israel, the goal is to weaken these terror organizations and these, the axis of resistance or evil, or, it depends on where you stand. And, the Shiite alliance connected to that. So eventually, when all of these players need to choose in the realpolitik, would they rather have Israel weak or Hezbollah and Hamas weak? I think there's no real dilemma there. There's a lot of back and forth, and we know a lot of tensions about the means Israel choose to reach that goal. But eventually, they all, share the same end goal of seeing these forces weakened.
And we have reached this point over the last 2 weeks. I know it goes on and on forever back into the midst of history. But this latest acceleration came after Israel expanded its war goals to include the return of Israelis to northern Israel. Why? Why did the Israeli War Cabinet decide that now is the time to not just try and get the hostages back, not to just deal with the terrorists, but to also do this as well?
Well, in Israel, the question was all along, why only now? The feeling was this was long overdue. There's been 11 months when these people have been forced to leave their houses with no prospects of any time coming back. If we want to be a bit more cynical, then we can also talk about the politics, how this move serves Netanyahu internally in his own, in his own base and in the political play in Israel. He felt the pressure from the public growing in a way that he could not resist it anymore. And there's no doubt, if you look at the polls, if you look at Netanyahu now, he is in the peak of power that he had, as much as he has been since October 7th, let's put it that way. And he is, this flip in paradigm, this very deep change he's trying to force on the game is working in his benefit. The Israelis after October 7th are still in shock, still in trauma. They feel like they have nobody to trust in the Arab world. They only can trust themselves. They feel, just take today, for example. Israel, has been under Iranian attack. It has actions in the northern border. There were also, the military was also operating in Jenin and in the West Bank. And there are, attacks by the Houthis. Israel was operating in Yemen yesterday. So Israelis feel completely and utterly surrounded by, aggressive, hostile forces. And the need to push back is an authentic cry from the public. And Netanyahu, by many people also in the security apparatus, feel like he's doing what needs to be done, actually.
Right. Just a quick update. I'm told 1 dead and 2 injured as a consequence of this attack from Iran.
And I believe one of them is actually in the Palestinian territories. So it's also something we need to bring into this mix of very complex region that we are in.
Yes, it's not just one side or the other that is getting damaged on this.
It's not a clear Muslims versus Jews conflict.
Hans Jakob Schindler, help us to understand the role and position of Hezbollah within Lebanese society and politics. It's often talked about as a state within a state, but I think lots of people don't really get how completely interwoven it is. It's not, we see it on the news, we hear about it on the news as a sort of terrorist organisation, but it appears to be much more than that within Lebanon.
Yes, so Hezbollah really is the closest you can come to a state within a state. Maybe the other example would be the Revolutionary Guards, the IRGC in Iran, where you do have Hezbollah having a political wing with parliamentarians. There were at some point ministers in the government. They have really perpetrated the Lebanese economy, including the financial industry. There are Hezbollah-linked banks, the Hezbollah-linked Hawala services, Hezbollah-linked hospitals, schools. They cater primarily for the Shia community. They grew out of the civil war in Lebanon, where the various militias from the various ethnic and religious factions inside Lebanon were at each other's throat and killed each other for many, many years. And really in response to the 1982 incursion, which was the second time after 1978 that Israel invaded Lebanon, southern Lebanon, Hezbollah was formed by Iran. And that's also explaining why this is such a closely linked group to Iran. Hamas, the Houthis, the Bahraini groups that the Iranians support are all organized by the populations in this area. Hezbollah was really the only part of the proxy forces that Iran actually organized by itself, by the Revolutionary Guards from the get-go. And they have made sure that they can finance themselves through the involvement in the Lebanese economy, but also Hezbollah in the last years, and this is one of the unintended consequences of our success with Iran sanctions, has developed into a major drug distribution network globally, transporting cocaine from South America through West Africa into Europe, laundering on a very large scale money, not only in Europe, but also in the Middle East. It is really, by all intents and purposes, a state with a criminal enterprise, a political force, a social factor for the Shia community in Lebanon, which is only 1/3 of the Lebanese population. So 2/3 of the Lebanese population have no benefit from Hezbollah having this particular position and are in opposition. But the political and security system of the state of Lebanon is in such a disarray for the last couple of years that really it's a sideshow. That's why the Israeli government is not negotiating with the Lebanese government.
Right.
I just want to give a quick update. We're hearing from Israeli media. They report that Israeli high-ranking people in the Israeli military say the military will operate forcefully throughout the Middle East already tonight. That's a hint that they're sending at the intentions of Israel to respond to this attack, probably. We might be seeing them operating in Iran, maybe still tonight. Otherwise, we also know they have endless bank of targets that they're trying to reach, if it's Iraq, if it's Yemen, of course, Lebanon and Syria, as always. But this is what we're hearing through Israeli channels, that the Israeli military claims to be giving a very harsh response already tonight.
OK, so we'll watch out for that. Meanwhile, we have a comment about Iran's missile attack on Israel and whether it may be meant to distract from problems in Iran. Pradeen Krishna G writes, Iranians are good people. The regime wants to improve its image, hence the drama. Iran is a poor country. It can't afford the cost of a war. People are suffering due to water shortages. What do you think, Shani? Is this just a distraction?
Well, I think this is something Israel is definitely banking on. They feel like Israel has been the puppet that the Iranian regime liked throwing at the people for a long time, sort of get them galvanizing against the goal of fighting Israel more than they were really intending to actively engage in a war with Israel. There's no doubt Netanyahu himself, we just mentioned it earlier, made a statement to the Iranian people saying, we know you have good, kind hearts, but your regime is actually leading you in the wrong way. At the same time, when we try to understand why they acted today, the Iranians. Because tomorrow, for example, is the eve of Rosh Hashanah. That's the New Year fest, the Jewish New Year fest for Israelis. And if they had launched their attack tomorrow, it would have been unbelievably a moral, blow to Israel. Would have been had a much bigger impact. And maybe choosing to do it today and not postponing in 24 hours shows us the great pressure they're under in Iran. And we have been seeing this debate going on in Iran in the last week about, between the moderate forces and the more extreme forces who were forcing Iran to respond. And, the idea was for Iran, the whole strategy of power that the Revolutionary Guards were orchestrating was having this ring of fire around Israel with proxies like Hezbollah doing the dirty job for Iran. And so there was a lot of back and forth within a public Iranian debate. Should we be stepping in? Because we've all these years, we've funneled all this money to all these proxies to save us the need to be putting ourselves, in jeopardy and directly act against Israel. We see that the pressure, I think, and the humiliation for Israel to not only act inside the heart of the Iranian capital, but also taking down one of Iran's, and Khamenei, the supreme leader's most close allies, Nasrallah. I think it pushed Iran to respond far more than I think in any other circumstances they would have chose to do.
And just tell us briefly, Hans Jakob, just to expand on this idea of Iran being a paper tiger, this force in the Middle East that everyone is careful not to antagonise too much, but you think there is less there than meets the eye?
Their ability is really disruption. Their ability is not conventional warfare. That's why they established this rocket program. They've been under one type or another of military sanctions consistently since 1979, then the Iran-Iraq war, then sanctions because of the nuclear dossier. So their air force is woefully unprepared and under-technologized compared to any other air force in this region, especially including also the Gulf states, let alone Israel.
See, I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that.
Their ability, however, lies in managing this proxy network. That's their actual deterrence weapon. And while they did not react when Israel really forcefully destroyed the terrorist infrastructure, the physical terror infrastructure of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, or didn't respond when Israel bombed targets of Hezbollah launch sites in Lebanon, the problem here is now the management of trust of these proxies. One proxy loses their leader inside Tehran. The other proxy loses their leader inside their home country. Now, the Houthis, all others, will have to ask the question, what does that actually mean? Am I just here to die for you? Or is there a point where you actually express forcefully your discontent with our leaders getting killed? That was the impossible position the Iranian regime was in. They were, in a way, a victim of the relationship that they built with their proxies and had to respond after Nasrallah was killed. I was surprised that they didn't respond when Haniyeh was killed. So this is a problem where, from the Iranian side, the escalation spiral is hard to dial back as well now, because now they've entered into this game, which they cannot possibly win. Right. Because this is not a ground invasion in Iran where Iranian Revolutionary Guards can, with guerrilla-style attacks, attack some Israeli or US troops. It's going to be airstrikes. And as showcased in April, Iranian air defenses are not capable to detect or prevent advanced technology from Israel to penetrate the airspace and hit a precise target.
OK, pick up on that.
I want to pick up, and I want to connect this back to Gaza, because Karim was also mentioning that, and if we try to look at the Israeli strategy, how does all of this work in part of Israel's other goal of the war, which is to bring back the 101 hostages still kept in the Gaza Strip? And the way, I'm sure tonight there was a lot of anxious people in Gaza watching this unfold, because Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, his dream throughout this, October 7th attack and in the month following, he wants to see an escalation. He wants to see Iran drawn into this conflict. He wants to see more and more forces acting with solidarity against Israel. And any escalation will serve Hamas. But what Israel is trying to do by hitting so strong on Nasrallah and by pushing back against Iran and their attack today would be to show him, forget about this. This is not going to happen. We are too mighty. We are too strong. If you're counting on any other forces to come and help the Palestinian cause, it's time to give this up. And hopefully they will push it in Israel's minds. It will push Sinwar and Hamas to make more concessions and finally maybe get a deal that will also solve the Gaza problem and will bring back at least most of the hostages still kept there.
And today has been a particularly a bloody day in this whole conflict. The big news of the day was the incursion, and then we had this in the last hour or so, Iran's attack on Israel. This is also a day in which 4 people were killed after gunmen opened fire in Jaffa in Tel Aviv. 8
the
people
updated number,
injured.
by the way, is 6.
Sorry?
The updated number is 6
Okay.
casualties.
People killed, people injured in the shooting. Israeli TV was showing video of 2 attackers coming out of a tram station and firing, and Israeli police said the shooters had been neutralised and the situation was now under control. So in amongst all of that, this happened today.
Yes. Israel is stretched to the maximum. The military in Israel is stretched to the maximum. And it's also something that Iran is slightly counting on. Because you see, you could say, well, what was this attack good for? Israel managed to intercept 99%, maybe 100% of the barrage. So what is it good for? It's exactly part of the Iranian strategy. If you look at, Hezbollah, and Nasrallah himself was saying that for a long time, seeing Israel as sort of as a spider web. It might look strong, it might look elaborate, but it actually can crumble in a second. And this is what the Iranians are counting on, this war of attrition, just trying again and again and again, and counting on the fact that the Israeli military is stretched for over a year on several fronts, and something will eventually penetrate that, what seems to be very efficient defense, and shield, protective shield over Israel, and then maybe they will gain some leverage. I'm not sure anybody can gain anything here, but there's definitely, what we're seeing now is both sides trying to upend what we've been, the agreement that was sort of unofficial but very clear, set for many decades. And now all cards have been reshuffled, and we're not sure yet how they will end up in the new order again.
Just pick up on that, if you would, Hans Jakob. This idea of Israeli overstretch now, dealing with Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and who knows what else.
Well, I mean, the Israeli military structure is really built on 2 ideas: having a very well-equipped military establishment with a relatively small professional army, because Israel is not a big country with a large population, but to have most of the population trained to be called up as reservists. That means any larger scale or longer-term military operation by Israel anywhere will mean a decision of how much damage you want to do to the Israeli economy, because most of the soldiers are going to be the managers and the workers and the cooks and the engineers and the doctors that are missing somewhere else in your economy. They are highly trained. They, especially men, have to do at least a couple of months per year on training and military operations, even in peacetime, to keep their training up. So you're calling up those reservists and immediately they are more or less combat ready. But that means if they are now in the north of Israel, and they are in the north of Israel because they were able to wind down major military operations in Gaza just before they announced the war aim of northern Israel. The 98th Brigade, which is now leading apparently these operations ground operations in Israel, had to move from Gaza towards the northern front, but also parts of that military brigade have been in action and are actually otherwise needed in the economy.
Thank you both so much for sharing your expertise with us. Hans Jakob Schindler from the Counter-Extremism project here in Berlin. Shani Rozanes, DW's Middle East analyst. Pithy, precise, engaging, interesting as ever. Thank you so much. You're watching DW. We'll have more on this and, of course, the full bulletin at the top of the hour. Have a good day.